members of the press, that's A-G-U-I-L-A-R-A. I couldn't let that go wrong.
You do have a nameplate they can copy.
Right. Thank you. I want to thank members of the Redlands Area Democratic Club, members of Local 12 and Carl for opening up this location, audience members, Ms. Reyes, former Congressman Baca for joining me. It's an honor to be here. My name is Pete Aguilar. I'm a husband, a parent, a small business owner, and the mayor of the city of Redlands. And I'm here for one reason, and that's because Congress is broken. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this has been called the most ineffective Congress since the 40s. And don't get me wrong, they've got a couple things done. They've named some commemorative coins. They've named some post offices. They've done a few things. But what they haven't done is address the core issues that we care about in this room. They haven't addressed jobs. They haven't addressed the economy. They haven't addressed global warming. These are the things that we care about here in this room. And by and large, the Republican-led Congress has been absent. It's no surprise that 8 out of 10 Americans don't think that Congress is getting it right. But this is a message that they don't want you to hear. In earlier this week, Congressman Miller gave an interview, and he took dead aim at me. And he talked about, oh, well, he's just a mayor. Pete's just a mayor. And at first I said, wow, this is a lot of attention. Congressman's taking aim at me. But then I started thinking, and I said, you know, he's right. He's right. I am a mayor. And as mayor, we have to get things done. We have to work together. Democrats, Republicans, decline to state. We do the things that our community expects us to do because that's our job. And the Republican Congress just isn't getting it right. Here at home, we've been able to do some important things. We've been able to balance the last 4 city budgets. We've embarked on a very comprehensive street infrastructure and repair program where 2/3 of our streets and roads will be improved over the next 5 years. We've joined a countywide gun buyback program where we've taken 300 guns out of the hands of individuals in this community voluntarily, including 10 assault weapons. But I'm here because I believe in public service as well. My first job was working in the San Bernardino County Courthouse for my grandfather, who was legally blind operator of that courthouse cafeteria. I learned the value of hard work, determination, and treating people with respect. You deserve much more out of Congress than gridlock and partisan bickering. And if you give me the opportunity, I'll work hard for San Bernardino County. I'll work hard for all of you to lend voices to our issues and to be there where we need us to be to deliver and get the job done. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much, Ron and Andy, and I want to thank the Redlands Democratic Club for hosting this forum, and of course thank the operating engineers for allowing us these facilities. Then I want to thank all of you, for coming and listening to the 3 of us right now, and I'm sure this is the beginning of many other debates that you'll see, where we'll be able to discuss what we feel is important for a lot of us. To start off with, I'm Congressman Joe Baca, a former member of Congress. I've been married for 45 years. My wife Barbara is out here. I have 4 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. And they're very important. For us, the important issues for a lot of us, and I'm going to get into a lot of the issues, but I'm going to talk about myself as a veteran, as an individual with a proven track record and experience. That's important when we talk about sending someone back to Washington, D.C., that it's going to address the issues that are going to impact a lot of us. That's why I was the only member of Congress to vote for the stimulus package that brought in $570 million into the area. $570 million that were brought back into this area because of the monies that were funded here. And that created job opportunities here in the Inland Empire. When you look at the infrastructure in the immediate area, see the roads, the freeways, the off-ramps in the area. These are jobs that have been created in the area. They're very important. So job continues to be an important issue for a lot of us to address. Making sure that we bring manufacturers into the area. Veterans issues becomes very important. Many of our veterans who have sacrificed so much, who have been in a war that we should have never been at, and I voted against going to war. I'm one of the only members from here, the Inland Empire, to actually vote against going to war. We should have never been in that war. And we've got to bring back our men and women who are serving there right now. But beyond that, what's important for a lot of us is education. Education is critical to a lot of us. Dealing with No Child Left Behind, it still is impacting many of our teachers, our students right now. We've got to make sure that they're in an environment that they can learn. And also, we've got to deal with higher ed to make sure that higher ed is affordable for a lot of our kids. They're our future. And if we don't deal with affordable education for our kids to continue to go on, many of them won't be able to get an education, can't borrow the money. It becomes very important. Water issues becomes very important for a lot of us too as well. It's critical in this immediate area. Housing, affordable housing becomes important for us. And I carried legislation on affordable housing that's important to a lot of us. These are one of many of the issues that are important. I voted for the letter of live bill, and that's an issue that's equal equality, equal pay for women and men who are performing the same job. I have a 100% voting record on labor. I've been there on many of the issues right now that are important for us. I look forward to your continued support and help. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to thank the Redlands Area Democratic Club. Thank you all for being here, taking time from your Saturday to be here to listen to three who want to be your congressperson. I want to thank the operating engineers also for opening their doors. The last time I was here was phone banking right in this corner here. They've always been very important here in the community to make sure that people are involved. That's very important. As you know now, my name is Eloise Reyes. I'm a candidate for Congress. But I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Colton. Went to Colton High School, Valley College, USC, Loyola Law School. I started working when I was 12 years old. Started working in the onion fields. I was an onion picker. That's how we got our money to pay for our school clothes, myself, my siblings, and we went with my mother. It was hard work. There were two things my mother told us all the time. Two things, hard work and give back. After I finished law school, I decided I wanted to come back because the reason I became an attorney is to give to my community. So I returned to the community and not only opened my own office, and when I did, I was the first Latina ever to open a law office in the county of San Bernardino. In addition to practicing law, which I've been doing for the last 30 years, the last 25 years I have spent contributing, volunteering with the legal aid in Colton and Riverside, primarily in Colton. That's part of what I need to do. That's why I became an attorney. We need to be public servants. We need to be servant leaders. That's part of who I am. One of the problems that I see, and I'm asked, why are you running for Congress? I'm really tired of the politicians. I want servants. I want servant leaders to be involved. And that's what I have been doing all of my life. I've been a servant leader. I've been here to serve the community, and I've done that. We've all received many awards, so I'm not going to tell you about any of the awards I've received. But I'm very proud of them because it recognizes the work that we've done. And to see what somebody will do in the future, you look at what they've done in the past. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. First of all, on the first question, there's already legislation that has already been introduced by Dianne Feinstein on the Senate side that addresses the issues of gang violence and guns in the areas. I support Feinstein's legislation, which I believe is very important to a lot of us, that deals with the gun issues. But we still got to deal with the problems that we have with gangs and violence in the immediate area. I believe that we've got to have proposals and working with the communities in our areas that can address a lot of the issues pertaining to gangs and violence and youth in our area. Involving the community in a partnership and collaboration becomes very important for a lot of us in dealing. I would make sure that we develop a proposal, listen to ideas in terms of what needs to be addressed, and dealing with the problems affecting our youth and those individuals, because we're spending too much money in incarcerating individuals. We must do more of the preventive measures than incarcerating, because it costs a lot more, and I'd rather spend that money in educating them. In reference to the supported the limitations of the size of the magazines. I support limitations of the size of the magazines and would support the legislation that would ban a lot of the magazines that we have right now. And in your position on background check, I support background checks. In fact, I introduced legislation in the Assembly, and Governor Gray Davis signed it during that period of time, that also had restrictions on gun shows and making sure that a lot of our guns and others were not sold during that period of time. Governor Gray Davis signed it into law, and then I would support the assault weapon legislation too as well. That's important for us because these guns right now, you don't need an assault weapon to hunt. It's ridiculous, and too many, they're using them for other reasons. I would work with law enforcement, public safety in our areas to make sure we continue to address the issues because they become very important for a lot of us in keeping these guns and these assault weapons out of the gang members in our area. Thank you.
Joe was correct. Senator Feinstein introduced legislation. Quite frankly, I was shocked that it couldn't pass. Something so basic as universal background checks. That was the minimum we should have passed to protect our children and the rest of the citizens. For me, it's very personal. I have a client I represented when he was 16. George was working after school, and one of his friends had taken a handgun into work, had it in the locker. During the break says, "Hey George, I've got a gun, just put it away." No bullets in it, aimed it at himself, nothing. During the next break, he says, "George, come on, nothing's gonna happen." Aimed it at George this time, went right through his cheek, severed his spinal cord, and George now needs 24-hour attendant care. That's very real to me. And when we talk about gun control, if we look at the people who have been affected, we know we have to do something. If we're talking about background checks, that, in my opinion, is a no-brainer. Universal background checks has got to be the first thing that we pass. What's my stand on assault rifles? Unless I'm shown how there is some benefit to having assault rifles, I can't imagine the need for them. The size of magazines, I have friends, I have relatives who are avid hunters. I want to protect their Second Amendment right. They have a right to bear arms. They have a right. But the citizens also have a right to be free of having somebody shoot a gun at them, have a gun taken from the parent's home. We all have a right to safety. And our safety, the safety of all of us, to me, has to take precedence when we're talking about gun control. Thank you.
For me, this issue is also personal. In December, I joined as the mayor of Redlands, Mayors Against Illegal Guns Coalition. I'm one of 900 mayors across this country who believe strongly that we need to have sensible gun reforms in our communities. That starts with background checks. That was a Senate bill, that is a Manchin-Toomey bill that was authored. Senator Feinstein also has the assault weapons ban, which I'm supportive of. She is supportive of my candidacy because she knows I'm going to protect our communities. There couldn't be more difference from Congressman Baca and I on this issue. He received an NRA A rating for his support, and I have to tell you that Congress the NRA has a stranglehold on our elected officials, and we need sensible gun reforms. It starts and ends with universal background checks. 82% of Americans support this, yet the House of Representatives won't even bring it up. The Senate can't pass it with a filibuster-proof number. I work closely with law enforcement here in our communities. We see it every day. I respect an individual's right to bear arms. I respect the Second Amendment, but first and foremost, we're tasked with protecting our communities. As a parent, as a father, this is a primary issue for me. After Sandy Hook, maybe it was because I also had a first grader, but this is an important issue for our communities. This is something that is important. This is something your House of Representative member needs to address, and silence on this issue or support for the other side just can't be tolerated. Thank you so much.
Boy, what a question. But a very important one, without a doubt. Before I answer it, I think that one of the things we have to remember is that what we're involving here is our veterans. And if we're involving our veterans, we have to remember that whatever promises we make to our veterans going out, we keep those promises coming back. With regard to Egypt and Syria, the news now tells us about gas warfare going on, chemical warfare, something that the president is looking at, and it's concerning him tremendously. It's like a line drawn. It's not going to be an easy decision, but I would like to be in Washington, D.C. as those decisions are being made. It's not going to be an easy decision whether we send troops or we don't. I want our troops to stay here. I want them to protect our land. But I do know that we are a powerful country. We are a leader in the world. And we are called upon as leaders to assist in other countries. Regarding due process before killing an American citizen who may be involved in terrorist activities, due process is a fundamental cornerstone of the American system. They must be afforded due process. Doesn't matter if they've committed the most heinous crimes, they must be afforded due process. Where do I stand on military defense expenditures? Well, certainly we have to have a strong defense. That requires money. I will tell you that my biggest concern is when the money is being spent for the contractors who happen to be the very good friends of those elected officials who are making the decisions. That's my biggest concern there. With regard, going back to Egypt and Syria, since I have a little more time, it's a global issue. This is something that the world is looking at. It's not something we're going to act upon alone. And if the entire world is looking at this and the entire world is concerned, we have to include the United Nations in these decisions. It has to be something that we work out to determine what steps we're going to take as a nation and as the world. Going back to my first sentence about our veterans. If the decision is that we're going to send our veterans, we're going to send the troops out. Before we send them, we are making promises to them. We are telling them, if you give to this country, when you come back, we will take care of you. We're not doing that. We're not keeping our promises to our veterans. The waiting period is unacceptable. Why do our veterans have to wait over a year to get the benefits that we promised them they would receive? My brother-in-law served in Vietnam, was exposed to Agent Orange. He died before they ever gave him an award. My sister-in-law went back to ask if she could get the benefits. They said, well, show us the award letter when your husband was found that he was disabled. She didn't have it. She had to begin the process. So whatever decision we make in sending our troops, we're making promises, let's keep our promises.
As a father of two young boys, obviously sending any of our children into harm's way is the most important decision that we can make. The safety and security of this nation is foremost. It's a very complicated issue, as all of you know. We should execute military decisions on a case-by-case basis to minimize the risk of those fighting for our freedoms. As Ms. Reyes said, when these veterans come home, we need to honor their service. The commitments that we have made to them, we need to live up to. The backlog at the VA is absolutely ridiculous. And we need to ensure that we're putting all of our resources to ensure that those veterans can receive the services that they have been promised. Recently, the United States, I think the President made a good decision in canceling the exercises in Egypt. I think that's a good move. Obviously, anytime a country uses chemical weapons on their own, as Syria as reports have indicated Syria has done, that is the most heinous offense that I think could be done. And we need to take measures, and we need to work with our friends to ensure the safety and security of those around the nation. But that doesn't mean that the United States is the world's policeman. And we need to be incredibly careful with how we allocate our troops and what we and the decisions that we make across the globe. And this is a key issue where Congress is obviously continues to be broken. When generals, when four-star generals go to Congress, they testify, and oftentimes they say, I don't need this piece of equipment. I don't need this financial obligation. But Congress tells them that they want it. And that's not the way decisions should be made. And when it comes to expenditures, and when it comes to ensuring the financial solvency of our military operations, we need to listen to those folks. Because oftentimes, I think members of Congress and others are trying to fight wars of past. They're not equipping enough technology. We're not fighting the wars for the future. And that could mean reduced expenditures, and obviously Congress just hasn't understood that piece. And they continue to exert their own influence over the purse strings on these expenditures. And I think it's costing all of us. And it's coming at the expense of critical domestic programs that could go into job creation that we could use here locally. Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to address one particular issue that was mentioned earlier in reference to my ratings from the NRA. I am a Second Amendment individual and do believe in the rights for individuals to bear guns, but I also support that that any of those guns should be out of the hands of criminals, mentally ill, or anyone else. I actually got a B- rating. And the reason I got a B- rating is because I supported Sotomayor for Supreme Court decision, and the NRA was opposed to that. I believe that she had the right to be there. We had not had a Hispanic on there, and I supported her. The other reasons why is that the NRA opposed me because I supported Eric Colton and the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, Asian Caucus, and the rest of the individuals when we walked out and didn't want to hold sanctions against Eric Colton. So I want to let you know, so I got a B- rating for it, so I just wanted to address that and to start off with now in addressing the issues that are important to a lot of us. As we look at the problems in the Middle East, it's important that we address those issues. And it's not easy for us, but United Nations has to be involved in part of the process in discussions and negotiations. It's not about just going to war. I've already had my experience of having to vote, and I voted against going to war. And it was not the easiest decision, because when you're in Congress, you're listening to 435 members, you're listening to classified individuals that come and they tell you the reasons why we should go to war or not go to war. And then you have on the Senate side, so you got 435 plus 100 senators that are trying to tell you the reasons why that we should be involved in war. And you know what, it was very difficult for me. I mean, it was very convincing to say there was weapons of mass destructions, we should go there. Well, we still haven't found any weapons of mass destructions. We should have never been in that war. And that's why I voted against it. But I also called even Bishop Barnes out here and asked for advice and said, Bishop Barnes, what do you think? Because, you know, these decisions just don't affect our troops. They affect our country. They affect the relationships that we have with others as well. That's why the decisions that we make are very important, not just to our veterans who are willing to serve or others that are willing to fight for this country, but the effects it has on our country. And it's very important that we deal with it very diplomatically, because we're about keeping peace. And the relationships between Egypt and Syria and what it means in the Middle East too as well to us becomes very important, because a lot of transfers are being done back east, whether it's funding for them, funding that goes through middle war and peace, and there's a lot of military expenses that go through there as well that become very important. Now, as far as regarding the involvement of the killing of terrorist activities, I believe in due process for any individual that's involved in a process. You can't just find them guilty, but we've got to make sure that there is due process. As far as your stands of military defense and expenditures, I believe that we're spending too much money in our military right now. We've got to make sure that we cut back the funding that we have. We have spent too much money. I've been there, I've seen it, and every contract that has gone out, we've wasted millions and millions of dollars, not only in the war that we have, but a lot of the contractors. Why do people want to be in war? Who gets the jobs? Where are those jobs created? It's not about the war that we have, it's about people, and I think that we've got to deal with each decision from a peaceful, diplomatic way in dealing not only with military and expenditures to make sure that we cut back. And there's a lot that we can come back in our military and still keep it sound and safe for the United States. And that's what President Obama also believes in. Thank you.
Obviously, we need to respect our civil liberties and be honest about it. And this is one of the key issues that we've seen come out. And we were all going to talk about this issue, obviously, but the latest as we sit here is that now there are many emails that have also been gathered as a result of this NSA process. The NSA is one of the most powerful organizations in the world. And the fact that they haven't been truthful with the American people and with the United States House of Representatives is incredibly troubling. We need to respect our civil liberties, but we also need to be honest about these programs' existence. And because they reach so far into our lives, and they are in such a unique position to exert that control, we need to monitor these. Congressional oversight needs to be in place, and we need to ensure that the NSA is doing exactly what they have authority to do. Recently in the news, there was also something called the Amash Amendment, which would have restrained the ability of the NSA to continue this program. I would have voted for the Amash Amendment because I do think that the NSA has overreached with this program, and I think I would have been joined by many members of Congress who would have made the same vote. This is an incredibly important issue in our communities and a very powerful organization, and we need to ensure that they are being open and honest about everything that they are doing. Thank you.
Pete Aguilar is correct. Our civil liberties are very important for a lot of us as we address this issue. But the fact of the privacy versus security becomes very important for a lot of us. This is individuals, whether it's classified information, especially classified information, should not be indulged or given to anyone. And that's very important. Whether Snowden committed a crime and giving that information to someone else, because we have the responsibility to this country and the protection of it and the loyalty that we're all sworn into. But we also have the Intelligence Committee that we have that actually investigates, does the oversight, does the accountability, and does a lot of the transparency to find out exactly what's been going on in this area. I would rely a lot on the Intelligence Committee to come back to Congress and tell us what we need to do to make sure that we continue not only to look at the Privacy and Security Act, and just as they recently voted on NSS recently in terms of the Privacy Act, because there's a lot of people that basically do not even want to have access to your phones, your email, and others. Well, I think it's important that we keep the Privacy Act in place to allow individuals to have that privacy, but at the same time, for the security of our country, it's important that we know what's going on. So that's important for us. Now, as far as the issues goes, I think it's important that we not only deal with this, but we deal with other issues that impact us, not only here, but how it affects us in Washington, D.C. And that's why it'll come before the 435 members. We'll end up voting on these issues. And I believe that a lot of research has been done, a lot of discussion will be done on the area, and that we've got to make sure that the top priority is that we continue to protect not only us, but every other citizen in the decision that we make. Thank you.
When I first heard about this issue, I thought, my privacy is the most important thing. How can anybody get any of my records? It isn't until you start to hear about the reason and you start looking at the balance between security and privacy. When I heard that President Obama talk about this and talk about the importance of security and that was part of the reason for this, it's easier to understand. But I think having the NSA be honest about what it is they're doing also is extremely important. For them to say, we're not collecting anything, and then we get the evidence that sure enough, they are collecting it. Oh, we're not collecting too much. Well, we get all the evidence that they are collecting a whole lot. All of the phone records, and now we hear, as Pete has just mentioned, the emails. There has to be a balance. And just as Joe mentioned about intelligence information being provided to show why the information is being gathered, what's being done with the information, all of this is important. But in the end, the question asks about privacy versus security. We're a great nation, and there is a lot that our country has to gather in order to protect us. I get that. But as a private citizen, I want to know that I can count on the protection of my privacy in my home, in my phone calls, in my phone messages, in my emails. I want to know that I have that privacy. It's an issue that is not easily, even as reviewing it before today, that balance between the security and the privacy is one that is going to take a whole lot of information to make that determination. But just as a general principle, my privacy as a private citizen, your privacy as a private citizen, has to be protected at all costs. And if, for security reasons, the government does need to have information, I want to be sure that they really had done the work they needed to do to determine that my records needed to be reviewed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, Ron, you're absolutely right. In Washington, D.C., the Republicans continue to address this issue of reproduction rights, and I would support the Roe versus Wade decision to make sure that we keep it intact, and that's very important for a lot of us. I think women have a choice, and that's their choice, and they should make it. It should not be a legislator telling a woman or anyone else in terms of what they should be doing. I also believe that we should provide funding too as well, because I believe funding is very important. Funding to make sure that individuals get the appropriate care, the appropriate attention, because we're talking about the safeguard not only of the human being, but also the possibility if they decide to have that child as well. So funding and counseling become very important as we address the issue pertaining to reproduction rights that are important to a lot of us. In D.C., as I stated before, there was a lot of amendments that they tack on to it. I voted against every one of these amendments that have come before us in Washington, D.C., and have been there with not only with Planned Parenthood, but also with many of the issues, even on the Roe versus Wade. And these are decisions that we have to make during that period of time. There's 435 members, 218 constitutes whether that bill passes, if it's just on a 238 or if it's just on a majority. And so we know very well that the Republicans like to use this. And they use these tactics because they know very well that when we come back home, they're saying, all right, do you believe in Roe versus Wade? Are you protecting pro-choice or pro-life issues? They use it for political reasons. And that's not the reasons why we should be voting on any of the issues that we have before us in Congress. We should be voting on those issues because they're the right decisions for our country, for the people that we represent, and for individuals. And everybody has that right. A woman has the same right as anybody else. And that's your choice and your body. And we shouldn't have to control that. And I would be there to make sure that we stand with you and make sure that we support the funding that becomes very important for us, not only now, but in the future too as well. Thank you.
There is a war against women. We see it in the decisions that are made. We see it in the legislation introduced. We see it in the votes taken. A woman's right to choose is her right to choose. It is her right. I want the woman to have access to anything and anyone she wants access to. If she wants to talk to a counselor, to her priest, to her rabbi, to whoever it is she wants to talk to, I want her to have access. But in the end, the woman has the right to privacy, and the woman has the absolute right to choose. Federal funding for Planned Parenthood is important. Planned Parenthood is often under attack, but Planned Parenthood provides so many more services. Cancer screenings, health care. There are many who come to Planned Parenthood. That's the only place they can receive medical attention. It isn't just reproductive rights of the woman, it's also health rights of the woman. And not just women, it's also the man and the children going to Planned Parenthood for health services. I'm very proud of the endorsement, the full endorsement of Emily's list. It was an important endorsement because they recognize how important it is to have strong Democratic women who are pro-choice. In their evaluation of who to endorse, they have come up with 6 women nationally. And in California, I was the only one who was recently endorsed. I'm very proud of that. We have some who are running for re-election who have also now been included in the list, but of those of us who had applied, I'm proud of the fact that I was the only woman here from California. A woman's right, reproductive rights, is such an important thing. I recently had a call from a friend who is a Republican who told me that that decision that she made when she was a teenager was the most difficult decision she made in her entire life. That was her decision. And she is the one that gets to live with the good and the bad of that decision. I had another friend of mine who called and said, Eloise, I don't know if I can support you because I don't like abortions. I said, talk to me about it. His daughter became pregnant when she was 18 and chose to have the baby. He says, you know how wonderful it was to meet my grandson for the very first time? I said, Bill, I'm very happy for that. But I'm also happy that you didn't go down to San Diego to visit your daughter in jail, because that's where she would have been if we didn't have the protections that we have right now under Roe versus Wade.
This is an important issue, and we've seen time and time again the Republican Congress and their assault on women. I think this is probably only second to healthcare with the number of votes and assaults that they take. And how on earth they don't understand that women have the right to make the best healthcare decision for themselves, I just don't understand. Women maintain that right. They should be afforded that right. We need to honor and protect it, but that isn't just an occasional vote that allows them. That means we need to be advocates for it. That means we need to stand with them. It means we need to understand that this is a very personal issue. And it means that we need to be advocates on their side. We need to support them, not just with legislation, but we need to support them locally. We need to support them at their events. We need to continue to honor that. I was proud last year to have the support of Planned Parenthood, who understands so much about this issue and the family planning issues and the services that are provided to so many of our residents, the preventative care that is often provided to those most at risk. And the statistics bear out that those in a lower socioeconomic status are more at risk of disease, they're more at risk of sexually transmitted diseases. You know, these are things where continued education with our young people, with our partners, which includes Planned Parenthood, is incredible, and we need to continue that they maintain that funding. And this funding will continue to be on the chopping block. Every Republican Congress places this on the chopping block because they just don't get it. They don't feel women should make the best decision for themselves, and they don't feel that they should be funded, that Planned Parenthood should be funded at all. 100%, I will be a champion and supporter of women's reproductive rights, and I will support a women's choice, whatever that is, if that is an abortion, if that is her choice. That is a fundamental piece of what we need in your elected representatives. Thank you.
As an attorney for 30 years, as a volunteer at Legal Aid for 25 years here locally. I started out with Legal Aid in East LA when I was in law school, but formally here in Colton for 25 years. And as an activist in the community, I've always fought for social justice. That's so important. It has to do with opportunities. It has to do with equality. It has to do with just opening a door. When we talk about gender equality, we know that's a problem. In as much as we'd like to think that all people are treated equally, the reality is that we aren't all treated equally. When we talk about women's wage and income inequity, it's a real thing. There have been many attempts to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Hasn't passed. This is, I talked earlier about Dianne Feinstein's bill for just the background check, the very beginning. This is another one that, in my opinion, is a no-brainer. An amendment that provides for equal rights, equal pay, treating women the same as we treat men. That's important. And if that were to come up while I'm in Congress, I would vote in favor of it. Recently, there was legislation to continue the Violence Against Women Act, the funding. Congressman Miller chose not to vote. He was nowhere to be found. So we can't say he voted against it, but certainly the truth is that he did not think that it was important enough to be present and to vote in favor of extending that protection. Racial justice, again, has to do with opportunity, equality. I'm very proud to say that within many of the organizations that I am a member of, many of the clubs, I'm so proud of the fact that that is a cornerstone for us. That's something that we fight for. We want to have racial and gender equality. We want social justice. We want people to have, as a legal aid attorney, I'm able to provide services to those who cannot afford an attorney. Without my service, or the service of those other attorneys who volunteer, that person would not have equal access to our justice system. That's wrong. And I'm very proud of the fact that I have been able to be a part of that solution, to provide equality and access to our justice system. Thank you.
I think it's pretty fitting here that we're also meeting on a day that the 50th anniversary, as Andy mentioned, of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, which is later this week. But they're honoring that ceremony today in Washington, D.C. And there's a very good quote that I like out of that speech. It said, "Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment." Dr. King talked about a lot of things, and unfortunately, we haven't fulfilled that dream. There are still so many categories of inequality that exist in our communities, whether that's gay and lesbian rights, whether that's worker rights, women's rights. Those are the things that I think you can expect out of your elected officials to talk about. And as Eloise mentioned, Mr. Miller, just not there. He put out a press release though, so don't worry. He put out a press release saying that he was proud that the Violence Against Women Act passed. He didn't talk about the 3 times he voted against it last session, but he talked about this time he was proud that it passed. So you gotta love Washington, D.C., folks. On the 50th anniversary, though, later this week, we need to pay attention to the words that Dr. King said. We need to continue to fight for those who don't have a voice. We need to continue to fight for opportunity. We need to fight to create jobs. We need to fight for your representatives to look like the communities in which they serve. At this point in the United States, we have one of the highest amounts of income inequality as we've had ever. And people have asked, well, what other countries do it well? And I saw an interview with former Labor Secretary Robert Reyes, and he said, you know who does it well? The United States. The United States between the 40s and 70s had the lowest percentage of income inequality in its nation's history because we invested in jobs, because we invested in infrastructure, because we honored the American worker, we built bridges and roads and highways. If we want to find a path out of income inequality, we can pass some public policy. We can make these changes. We can do this. This is within reach. And this isn't folks in Washington, D.C. lobbing press releases. This is something we need to take action on. We need to continue to fight for each and every day. Thank you.
We must embrace diversity. And that's the biggest fear that people have, is diversity, the makeup of our country. And I've always been one that has always been there on civil rights, civil issues. I've been a public servant for 34 years. But it's not just addressing the issues, it's leading by example. When you begin to demonstrate, protest about the inequities that are going on in our country, whether it's equal pay for both men and women, especially women, and that's why I voted for the Ledbetter Act that said that women should receive the same pay as a man for performing the same duty. I've demonstrated. I have the experience. I voted. I'm not just talking about it. There's a big difference between talking about it and actually voting. On the issues of social justice, Eva Claiborne and I from North Carolina had a hearing for 13 hours on civil rights, dealing with discrimination against black farmers, Hispanic farmers, women, and others. Because of the hearings that we had for 13 hours where nobody else stood, Eric Holden finally issued a decision on the Pickford decision on discrimination towards black farmers. But you've got to stand up for those issues. Not only those issues, but the Voting Rights Act that's right now being appealed by the Supreme Court. We've got to stand there and vote to make sure that everybody has a right to vote and they're not discriminated against. That becomes very important. Issues like food stamps for equity for the poor and others, that becomes important. I was chair on the Ag Committee on Nutrition. I made sure that funding went out to make sure that 47 million people did not go hungry in the United States. These are people. I changed the name from food stamps to SNAP, to have dignity and integrity to individuals. I was on food stamps. I know what it was like when people looked at me and going through the line, my wife and I. So we said, you know what, we're going to change that. And then when people looked at us because we were in line and we were counting our coupons, people looked at us like we had no dignity and we shouldn't even be there. I said, because I had the experience and the knowledge and lived it, I changed it to EBT cards. Now it's like our American Express card. But also I wanted to make sure that I did, because I led by example. When we talk about no child left behind, many of our children, they were going hungry. Well, we didn't have a lunch program in all 50 states. I made sure that we included that in the Farm Bill to make sure that all 50 states had a lunch program so our kids wouldn't go to school on an empty stomach. It's about taking on those issues. Now, as far as gender equality, I believe that we've got to, and I have, supported equal rights for gay and lesbians. They have the right as well as anyone else, and they have a choice to make. And it's important that we allow that equality and that justice that is there. And healthcare becomes very important for a lot of us because that's part of the equality that's there. I voted for the Obamacare, and it's important because pre-existing conditions would still be there right now. Many of our young children and others up to the age of 26 will have coverage because of the health bill that we passed. Thank you.
Well, first, the first thing that we can pass in order to create jobs here in the Inland Empire is comprehensive immigration reform. There's an independent study, actually a Republican study, a conservative think tank, they like to say. A conservative think tank actually ran the numbers and said 17,000 jobs will be created in the 31st Congressional District if we had comprehensive immigration reform. Because what we see is immigrants are more likely to open up new businesses, they're more likely to enter the job market, and we can count on those jobs that will help our communities and help this region. 17,000 jobs, that's nothing that we can ignore. Congressman Gary Miller has just been so out of step on this issue. And it isn't just one thing, folks. It isn't just the DREAM Act he opposed. This is the 14th Amendment where he wants to do away with birthplace citizenship. This is time and time again. In 2010, he said he would never vote for comprehensive immigration reform that included a path to citizenship. Just a couple of years ago. Now he's on a listening tour, though, so don't worry. That's the first thing we can do. I mentioned in my last answer, though, you know, income inequality is so tied closely to jobs. We need to make investments, and as governments, we need to make investments in our communities. That's what we've done here in the city of Redlands, where we have seen problems, street and road infrastructure and improvement. We've created hundreds of jobs, putting that money out on the street in bids where good labor can provide those services, repair our streets and roads, repair our parks. Those are things that government should be doing and can do more of that will create jobs here in the Inland Empire. There's also some comprehensive plans that Democratic leadership has discussed. It's called Make It in America. And it really does seek to put the United States in a strategic advantage to continue to grow jobs, to grow our economy. But instead of addressing these issues of job creation, the Republican Congress, again, I mean, who knows? It's been an hour or two since we've started. You know, they'll probably put the 41st vote to repeal Obamacare on. So they're not focused on the issues that we care about in our communities. This is something we absolutely can fix. Comprehensive immigration reform, 17,000 jobs created, investing in our communities, infrastructure, streets, roads, parks, sewers. Those are things that are important to our communities, and that's where government should lead by example on this issue.
Thank you. I do agree with Pete on comprehensive immigration. In fact, I've been a supporter of comprehensive immigration since I've been in the state legislature, not only in creating the jobs, but also I've led by example and have actually introduced legislation and went along with Luis Gutierrez and even our past Senator Kennedy, who passed away. We led the effort to try to pass comprehensive immigration. It becomes a political ball in Washington, D.C., because it's not about doing the right thing in passing comprehensive immigration. It's about the elections that are coming up. And that's what they use it. And that's why it's become very difficult to pass it. I think it's important. And both parties understand it's not just about luring Hispanics or others to vote. It's about doing what's right, because comprehensive immigration affects everyone, whether you're black, you're brown, you're white, you're Asian, and others. And that becomes very important. Now, in reference to the economy and bringing jobs into this area, it's important that we look at trying to develop a master plan in this district for the surrounding communities and talk about the kind of jobs that we can get without being competitive with one city versus another city, because we already know that the redevelopment funding was taken away at the state level, so that made it very difficult in attracting businesses. A lot of the enterprise zones that were in the area were also, taken away at the state. So we've got to look at being creative in attracting manufacturing jobs into this area. They become so important for a lot of us. The infrastructure becomes important for us too as well. And because of the $570-some million that have come in, many of those roads and those freeways, because of transportation, they have created jobs. These are people that are actually working on the 215, the 210 freeway, the off-ramps in the area. Transportation is critical to us in terms of the immediate area, but we've got to look at other kind of jobs that we can bring in, the health field too as well. Because you know that we passed already the Obamacare, and the health bill becomes training, to make sure that we train our kids to make sure that they're ready for the 21st century. The kind of jobs that they're going to get, whether it's technicians or professional individuals that says, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse, I want to be an x-ray technician, whatever they want. But I believe that we have the responsibility to provide the training and utilizing our educational institutions in providing the training that will get our kids into the 21st century and the types of jobs that we need. We need to be innovative, but we also have to think in terms of being competitive and not just worry about the Silicon Valley. Why can't we have our own Silicon Valley right here in this area where jobs can be available to many individuals? I will be there as one individual to make sure that we not only look at funding, but funding that can come back, not just on appropriation funding, because they cut all the appropriations funding, they cut a lot of the stimulus funding, but there are monies that are also available that can be brought back to the area through grants that are available. The nanotechnology at San Bernardino Valley College, I helped get some of the funding for the nanotechnology. That's created jobs in the area in terms of our future. But we've got to work with our educational institutions, the community colleges, our state colleges and universities, in building the kind of incubators that we need to make sure that jobs will be available, not only now, but in the future as well, in a variety of different areas. Thank you.
What job programs would I recommend, would I propose? Recently, I went to the Carpenters Union in Ontario. They have a great facility. Not everybody wants to get a college degree. We need to be able to train those who want to be apprentices, journeymen. And that is a perfect facility. I was very impressed with it. Joe mentioned the nanotechnology. It's a good example. The Professional Development Center at the San Bernardino Community College District brings in prospective employees and trains them. I went in and they were doing the electrical circuits there. These are things that are already in place. We need to be able to work on these. Healthcare, it's a big deal. I'm very proud of the fact that I was involved with in founding the Inland Empire Community Health Center in Bloomington. So not only do we provide health care, that was in the 80s. Not only is there health care, but then there are jobs there. It's those things that Pete talked about with the immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform. He's right. The studies do show that so many of those small business entrepreneurs are those very immigrants. Those are the jobs we want to get. That's very important. As a small business owner for 25 years, that's exactly what I've been doing. I have my employees depend on me. I need to be able to make payroll. And I know there's so many others who have those small businesses and that's exactly what they need to do. They bring in the employees, they train them. Some of it is on-the-job training. But when we have those facilities that can do the training, we need to look at that. Arrowhead Regional Medical Center is now in the process of establishing a new medical school. University of Riverside just established their first medical school. First one in I don't know how many years. That's wonderful. I was part of the community advocate, the Dean's Community Advocate Group in putting together. I wasn't the one that put it together. I'm not going to take any credit. But I was part of the community that wanted to be involved in selecting the process for the students in knowing what was going to be offered. We accepted our first 50 students. We're very proud of that. So now we have 50 students who will become the next physicians. Part of the admissions process for the University of California School of Medicine in Riverside is that they have to want to come back to the community. That's a big deal. So not only are we training new doctors, but as part of the training, we're asking them to commit to staying in our community. Those are the jobs we need, and we all need to work together so that we do bring those jobs. The people that I talk to in the district tell me they want hope. They want to have that job. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking for a hand up. And the best way to do that is with jobs. Let's find the jobs for them. The infrastructure that was mentioned, that's key. We need to bring that money back into the community for infrastructure, and we need to be sure that the jobs that are given are with people from our community. If we're going to be left with a debt, we should also have some economic gain in those jobs. Thank you.
Well, it's a complicated one. It's not a simple answer. And it's one that impacts a lot of us as we look at whether we support EPA determination of carbon emission. And I would support legislation that would determine the carbon emission because of the effects it has on the quality of life for all of us in the area. I think that's important when you look at it because it's the air that we breathe. It affects us. We know that because a lot of the smog that comes in from the LA basin area and it bounces off the mountains and it comes back to us, it impacts a lot of us. It impacts our children. Many of our children, who can't even play because, the alert goes up because during the summers, because the heat is on, like now it's about 100 and some, but it's cool in here. But if we were outside, the impact it would have a lot of our kids who are playing sports, whether it's football, or whether it's soccer or some form of outside activity during that period of time. So I think it's important that we have some kind of standards and we support carbon emission because of the impact it does have on the quality of life of many of our children that are impacted here. Now, as far as the Keystone Pipeline legislation, I actually voted for it. I'm not going to tell you I didn't vote for it because I believe that we've got to look towards alternative energy into the area. I believe that we can't rely on foreign oil to come into the area. And I believe the Keystone is one area that President Obama also supports and has encouraged many of the other individuals to support it as well. Now, as far as looking at renewable energy, I think we've got to look at renewable energy. But we've also got to look at global warming and its impact it's going to have on us too as well. It's something that we've got to take serious, and this is where I would seek a lot of advice from scientists, individuals that are experts. We're not experts on these subject matters. We have to look towards other individuals that can give us the right kind of guidance, the right kind of information, and making sound decisions that need to be done. But we've got to be open-minded. We've got to be able to communicate, and we've got to be able to listen. And we've got to look at, not only when you look at energy and oil and coal and nuclear, but solar energy. That becomes a lot of, it's important to a lot of us. It's an area that we're going into a lot of the solar energies right now. If you look at a lot of the homes, I believe that they should be built. And when I try to look at legislation and passing that dealt with solar energy, they said it has to be done at the local level. So city council and local ordinance have to develop what they do with developers in the area. But I try to do it on a national-wide basis because we've got to look at saving costs because the worst thing for a lot of us is that a lot of us are in fixed income, or a lot of us don't make that kind of dollars, but when you look at the cost that impacts a lot of us in terms of our energy, our gas prices, we've got to look for alternatives too as well because we want to make sure that it's affordable for individuals, not only in terms of energy and gas and nuclear and fossil, but we've got to look at using waste too as well because, we can convert a lot of the waste and the farmers have done that in converting waste for energy. And it can be sold back to us. We've got to look at different alternatives. And there are ways where we don't have to rely on foreign entities to provide a lot of the energy that we need. but let's utilize what we have right here. And with that, I think that we can deal with a lot of these problems, and hopefully as we can begin to address global warming, is that we get the right kind of information to make sure that all of us are protected in dealing how it may impact all of us. Thank you.
It's an important issue. I have a strong commitment to keeping our environment as clean as possible for our future generations. That's very important. How we do it, we're not all going to agree. In Congress, I would fight to protect EPA, Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act. Very important. Fracking in California, I recently saw a documentary. The issue is the fact that fracking is going on, but nobody registers it. We have no idea how much is going on in California because there's no requirement to have it registered. So that's legislation that I know here in California, that's something they're looking at, so that it will be something that has to be registered. So at least we know where the fracking is going on, make sure that they are complying with whatever regulations they need to comply with. Will I support alternative energies? Absolutely. I think more money needs to go into looking at those alternative energies. We need to find out what is available to us. I want to reduce our dependence on oil. It's very important. We talk about the increase of the cost of oil because it's all coming from the Middle East. We need to reduce that. We can't continue the way we're going because of the cost. That's one thing, but more importantly, because of what it does to our environment. That's very important. Talking about developers being subsidized, so many people receive subsidies. If we're talking about subsidizing someone who's going to provide clean energy, I certainly would be in favor of that. If it's something that's going to provide us with the cleaner energy that we're looking for. It has to be competitive also, though. If we subsidize one and not another just because one is a friend of one of the legislators, they've got a leg up on that. So we have to have competition also. And if we have a number of organizations that are doing their development, their research, if we're going to subsidize one, we need to be able to provide the subsidy to all. Otherwise, we provide subsidies just to those who somehow have the connections, and they will go further in their research and their development, but it's an unfair competition. Another thing that we need to do is we need to close loopholes. Sometimes we have the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. There are so many loopholes, and there are many who know how to find those loopholes. It's usually the friends of those who proposed the legislation, wrote it up a particular way. We need to stop that. If we're saying we want clean air, let's work for clean air. Let's fight for that clean air. Not just for some, but for all, so that we all play with the same rules. Not one person getting a break because they know somebody else. In the end, what we want is we want to leave this planet in a better place than when we first got here. We want our children and our grandchildren to have cleaner drinking water and cleaner air. Thank you.
Climate change and global warming is a very real and growing problem. Here locally, just like the bumper stickers say, think globally, act locally. Here in Redlands, we've taken our own measures. We were the only city in San Bernardino County to pass a climate action plan. We put together volunteers from business, from industry, here in our communities, environmentalists, and we put them in a room and we talked about the issues that were important to all of us. We talked about creating a template that can be used as individuals want to develop property, as individuals want to support trails, All of this can be done. And we adopted the Climate Action Plan here in the Redlands City Council, both in part as part of our sustainability plan that's required regionally, but we did it before the regulations were adopted. We did it because it was the right thing to do. And we did it because safeguarding our environment for our children is our primary goal with respect to this issue. That is how I would view all of these issues, is what type of environment are we going to leave for the next generation. I would oppose Keystone Pipeline. I've made that clear in comments previously to groups and organizations. I don't feel that as long as individuals are living in poverty, we do not need to be subsidizing the oil industry. I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that that's right. And I think that California can lead the way on this issue, as we have in the past. California has very impressive renewable energy requirements that we require for our utilities. 33% of their stock has to be come from renewable sources, wind, solar, 33% by 2020. And the state of California is on track to meet and exceed that goal. Those are things that the state can do. We can act locally in our cities, but the federal government has to play a role in this. And for too long, Congress has been broken. They haven't addressed this issue. They aren't looking out for the long term. They aren't looking out for future generations. These are issues that the next Congress is going to have to be working with. And the number one way that we can address this issue, if I'll cut to the last chapter, is by electing a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives. That is what we can do to affect this issue. That is what we should be about, and those should be our goals. I appreciate the opportunity. We'll have time in a close, but I did want to say a special thanks again to the Redlands Area Democratic Club and Ron for moderating this. We'll get to our closing now, and the marathon session is coming close. One more piece. I forgot to address one of the 12-part questions. So nobody asked me this later. We need to find regulations. We need to be very, very firm to oppose fracking. Right now, they can't even define it. They don't even know what it is. And I think we can help the state of California make their decision. But we need federal policy on this issue, because we don't need a patchwork quilt, as so often happens. Different states adopting different regulations. We need good, strong federal regulations so we can define it and so we can keep our communities safe. Thanks so much.
How many, by a show of applause, how many think that any one of these three candidates would be a tremendous improvement over our current Republican representative? Okay.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank the Redlands Area Democratic Club for doing this, for hosting this, and the operating engineers for allowing us to be here. This is important. It's important that we all be here, the three of us, and Danny, you'll meet later. But it is important. You, as the voters, need to know who we are. You need to know why it is we think we should receive your vote. One of the questions that's often asked is about the gridlock in Washington. I think the problem with Washington is that when they negotiate like this. They don't want to talk. They have their position, and that's it. Part of what I have done as an attorney for 30 years is negotiate. I've represented thousands of clients. I have a client I have to represent. I need to be able to get the best benefit for that client. And even though I may have my own opinion, and I will share it with my client, in the end, I have a client that I'm representing. And I want what is best for him or for her, but he or she decides in the end. We've all talked about labor. Labor is extremely important. Just as with the Affordable Care Act, we took away the power from insurance companies to make decisions about our health care. It's the same thing with labor. If we don't have organized labor, then we give all the power to the employers, to the companies, to the corporations to make every decision. We're not going to have protection for our workers unless we are allowed to organize. It's extremely important. One of the things that I think is important in looking at what we do is to be sure that as we look at our candidates, we want someone who is going to be in greatest contrast with Gary Miller. Gary Miller has made it his quest to do whatever is best for him, best for those that he believes he represents. We have a very diverse community, a very diverse district. And the district needs to be represented in all of its diversity. It cannot be that we take votes just for the sake of voting, like voting to repeal the Affordable Care Act 40 times, just because that's what the party tells him to do. We can't continue to do that. That's a waste of our time, waste of our money to have them do that when they know nothing is going to come of it. When we talk about, another area that we talked about earlier was veterans, and I stand by that. Those are promises made. Another group that we make promises to is our seniors. We tell them, vote, pay into Social Security, pay into Medicare. When you're ready, we'll provide you the benefits. And now we're telling them, well, we may not be able to provide the benefits. We're a great country. We need to be able to keep our promises. And I know that we can. And that's something that we should absolutely do. This dysfunction in Washington also has to do, again, with too much emphasis on politics, not enough emphasis on policy. We know who we represent. This is our district. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where I was born and raised. I'm not going anywhere. I have represented so many of my clients, and I want now, I believe in the American dream. I absolutely do. That a young girl who picks onions at the age of 12 can one day grow up to be a U.S. Congresswoman. And with your help, that can happen. Thank you.
Again, thanks to the Redlands Area Democratic Club, Local 12, and all of you for taking time out of your Saturday to be here. We've heard, I'll touch on this right at the top, and I've touched on this a few times throughout my discussion. This gridlock in Congress is just unacceptable. And sending the same people back to Washington, D.C. and expecting a different result just won't work. In fact, Einstein called it the definition of insanity. As mayor, I've worked across party lines. I've worked to get things done. The city leans a little Republican despite our best efforts here. But what we have done is we talk about our values. We talk about the things that are important to us. We pass balanced budgets. We do the things that our community expects us to do. Not because we're scoring political points, but because it's our job. That's what you should expect out of your representatives. I grew up on 27th and Waterman in San Bernardino. My folks were born and raised in San Bernardino. My dad on 5th and Mount Vernon, my mom on Tillman Baseline. This is the community that raised me. I went to the University of Redlands through grants and scholarships. I'm still paying those loans. You didn't ask a student loan question, but if you would have, I'm your guy. You know, those are the things, real life experiences that your representative needs to represent you in Congress. I feel I can do that job. With your help, I know we can. Instead of solving problems to address these issues, though, Congressman Miller, it's not that he's just on the wrong side of some of these issues, he's just not even around. And, it's so frustrating. And I mentioned it before, but the number one thing that we can do, that you'll be tasked to help with, is electing a Democratic representative to represent you in the 31st Congressional District. This is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to elect a voice who will be there with you on immigration, who will stand up for workers' rights, who will stand with labor, someone who will support the Affordable Care Act, not because an entity says so, but because it helps our communities. Right now, 9,000 young people, because of the Affordable Care Act, are covered under their parents' health care to the age of 26 as a result of that legislation. 9,000 people in this congressional district. 65,000 seniors are receiving free preventative care because of the Affordable Care Act. And many, many thousands of young people with pre-existing conditions now are covered. And if the insurers had their way, if we roll back the clock on these issues, the insurers will continue to lock them out because they don't want their voice heard, and because they don't want to cover this, and because they think it's too difficult. Folks, it isn't too difficult. This can be done. We have an opportunity to chart a new course here. And it starts, this is our first forum, as was mentioned, it starts with the Redlands Democratic Club. I've been honored to receive endorsements from folks around the nation, and that's fine and dandy. The number one endorsement I received, which was early on, and we had a recount, but we don't talk about that, was my wife Alicia, who's somewhere in the back here. And I appreciate her giving so much time and energy to this as well. But this is important for our communities, it's important for our families. With your help, with your endorsement, you could be steering the path to elect the next representative from this region. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Enjoy.
Again, Ron, and thank you very much for having us, the Redlands Democratic Club, operating engineers, and all of you, for taking the time from your busy schedule to be out here and listen to all of us, and hopefully we'll be able to listen to Daniel in the future as well. To address the issue of gridlock and to address some of the other issues. And Mayor, you're absolutely right. We shouldn't just send someone back to DC. We should send people that are going to be effective, that have made a change, and have done something. That's why I'm a veteran, have a proven track record, and have the experience. And I've demonstrated that in bringing back the revenue back in our area, addressing many of the issues that impact a lot of us. The housing issue that impacts a lot of us. I carried legislation as well that dealt with first-time home buyers, allowing them to purchase a home, because we're having a lot of these investors who are coming in and buying the homes, and many individuals that couldn't buy a home are now able to buy the home. We got to make sure that it's affordable for individuals too as well. That becomes important for a lot of us. And as a veteran, yes, I believe we've got to put a high priority for a lot of our veterans who serve our country, who are willing to make the sacrifice and give their lives. But not only when they're serving us, but when they also return back to us. And there are many homeless veterans that are out there right now. There are veterans that need retraining. And we've got to look ways of finding funding to make sure they have the appropriate training so they can be productive individuals back in our society. That's why there was no legislation before that dealt with post-traumatic stress syndrome. I carried that legislation to make sure that it's available for many of our veterans to get the counseling before they get in and after they come back. It's important that we do take care of our veterans, but that they also receive the benefits that they're entitled to, and their spouses and others that they're entitled to. And they're not getting that. But we need strong voices. We don't need someone to tell you, this is what I'm going to do. We need people that have demonstrated and have done what we need to do. And that's in other areas too as well. Whether to deal with a water issue in this area that affects a lot of us. And you know that I was hit a lot on water last time, but yet I brought in, $1.4 million to clean up perchlorate, and then I brought in, along with Feinstein and Boxer, we designated the area as a super fund, and $31 million have also come in to continue to look at the water problems that we have. But we also must protect Medicare and Social Security. for many of our elders too as well. Those are important for a lot of us as we look at addressing issues that are important to us. And as far as labor goes, you know, labor is what made this country so great. Men and women that were willing to work. But we've also got to allow individuals to have the right to organize. And that's why I supported the Choice Act and voted for it. It didn't pass in the Senate side, but we got it out of our side of the House. It just didn't pass on the other side. But it's important that we continue to educate our public. Now, we also must address the issues of the poor, the disadvantaged, and individuals that don't have a voice. And that's why I want to make sure that I go back to Congress to continue to address the poor, the disadvantaged, and individuals that don't have voices. Because if we don't speak out, and apparently we don't have anybody speaking out here in the Inland Empire in behalf of the poor, the disadvantaged. I've demonstrated that and was on the floor and I spoke out every opportunity. For those that are going hungry, I spoke out. For those needing food, I spoke out. Willing to make the changes that needed to be done. Now, as far as gridlock goes, you know, the Republicans right now, they're willing to shut down government. They don't care about what's right or wrong. They just care about shutting government and about the next election. When I was there, it was about who was going to be president of the United States and who was going to get elected. They didn't care about what was right. They're willing to shut it down right now. And there's a lot of important issues that are still facing us right now that we've got to address that are pending before us in Congress. The Farm Bill is still pending before us. Transportation is still before us. Lifting the debt ceiling is still there because they want to shut government. We've got to make sure that we not only pass the Farm Bill, defense furloughs, and the debt ceiling, but we also need to take back Congress. And you know what? This is a seat. And I feel that I'm the only one that can win the seat and beat Gary Miller in the 31st Congressional District. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for sticking with it. I'm really amazed that there's still no empty seats and there's still standing room only at the very end of a long program.